All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Pierce Brothers. Today we're doing something kind of fun. We've been wanting to do something like this for a while and discuss the Sig P320. Now, we as a channel, if you go watch our history and our videos, we make fun of the P320 pretty often.
You blow your balls off.
But at this point, you know, I don't think it's a joke anymore. You know, like, yeah, we'll sit there and discuss it and that, but there are so many instances now of the gun going off in a holster, and we're going to discuss all this. We'll talk about the FBI's findings and that they found in their thorough investigation, I will add. Sig has their own claims that they've come out and said to rebuttal all this, but ultimately, at this point, you got to have questions on whether the Sig P320 is a safe handgun to carry or not. And
so, just a very succinct comment here. I heard one guy sitting there saying, where there's a lot of smoke, there's bound to be a fire. And there's been so many reports over years now from police departments, military, just
it's not one or two
civilians.
Isolated
it's not like, and it's all centered around this one handgun. It's not like it's happening with Glocks and M&Ps and all these other guns, but so there's something going on. What's going on?
So there's on that note, you know, there's a video, it was Military Arms Channel, I believe, did an interview with Sig, and it was all about the 320. It's about an hour long if you want to go watch it, but Sig basically sat there and tried to defend themselves through the whole thing.
Yeah.
And basically their claim was that the holsters are causing these issues, and that most of the time when these are going off, guys' keys or something else are getting caught as the trigger's going in and it's pulling the trigger. And that may be the case in some of these instances. They have found that, and Sig has won some of those lawsuits. However, the flip side of that, Sig has paid out millions now in lawsuits when they've been found responsible for it. And you can look it up, and there's court cases that go both directions. And just like any gun that's heavily used, there are going to be negligent discharges. You know, that's just a fact. Anyways, but Sig in this video, they claim that because there are so many P320s in circulation, you hear more about it than other guns. And I would argue that there are just as many, if not more, Glock 19s in circulation than the Sig P320.
Definitely.
The P320 is, what, 2018 or 17 when the Army introduced it?
2017, officially adopted.
And since then, the 320 has become extremely popular just because of that military contract, and everybody decides.
Sig says there's like 5 million of those in circulation.
Correct.
20 million Glocks have been made.
20 million Glocks, and yet you don't hear about Glocks going off in the holsters, and yet there's more of them in circulation. So I don't buy Sig's argument on that, and we'll discuss some findings here as we go along. But
well, the thing about Sig that really frustrates me the most is anything that they come out with, that first year or two of production, they've always had issues with it. It doesn't matter if it's electronic optics, it doesn't matter if it's a gun, it doesn't matter what it is. They always have issues, and they always do their own little recalls, and oh yeah, you know, that's not working correctly, so send it in, we'll fix it. And it's like, when you go to a product about something, it's one thing if it's one thing that Sig did like this, but their electronic optics, everything that they do, it's always got problems. So, like me, I have some of their electronic optics, and I always wait until it's been in production 2 or 3 years before I buy anything, because it's like, I don't want to buy it and then have problems with it. I don't want to be messing around with sending something back and forth a gazillion times, and I'd never buy a Sig handgun, period. But yet, you know, with their optics, okay, admittedly, they got some good optics.
Porter uses their binoculars and rangefinders, all that.
Yeah, but you always wait until it's been in production a while, because they always have shitty shit.
Let's get back to the 320. So let's start back at the beginning of the 320 as far as military contract and all that. I'll let Dad kind of give some history here on that with the trigger upgrade and all that.
Well, and this has been a while since I've researched this, because I was actually acted as an expert witness on one of these a few years ago, and I was sent the sample gun that actually went off and so forth and hit a guy's hand, and I couldn't make the gun do it. I tried everything under the sun for 2 or 3 months that I could, different angles, because they're reported to be dropped at certain angles that they'll go off. But this gun went off by itself, but I couldn't make it redo it. So it's just the way it is sometimes. But here's the deal. When the military adopted it, they made Sig redesigned the trigger group, and those old triggers went into the civilian guns, and then they ultimately became a voluntary upgrade. The gun that I was speaking of a moment ago actually had been upgraded with that new trigger system, but it still hasn't corrected the problem entirely. There's way too many videos.
Yeah, and on that, just real briefly, on that note, Sig claims that upgrade for the military was purely cosmetic because the triggers and all that were the wrong color. That's what Sig claims. Wrong color, and the military wanted the different color. That's what Sig claims.
And Sig claims that it was easier to just the military would just ship all the guns back, and then Sig would ship them all new guns with the right colored trigger and safety.
Those guns that were shipped had the voluntary upgrade that became known, and all those. Anyways, but continue, Dad.
Well, there's been way too many videos out there, and even last night I looked up on the internet. I actually got on the internet, you guys, looked up some videos, and
that's a dinosaur.
Yeah, a dinosaur. There's other things I'd rather be doing than on the internet. So anyway, I looked on the internet and saw a bunch of new videos out of mostly law enforcement or trainers where, I mean, it is very clear they haven't touched that gun, nothing, and boom, it goes off right in the holster. One guy was sitting down on a bucket, boom, it went off. Hit his testicles and took them off. Another one, a trainer was actually giving instructions. His hands was clear, and boom, it goes off. Another one, police getting out of the car. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And
something funny here. So in that video that Sig did their interview with, they brought up they were so vague about it. They were like, "There's that video circulating right now about the gun going off, and everybody." You know which video it is. They just but they didn't actually specify the event. And they're like, but we found that his keys, he just holstered that gun and his keys were in that holster with the gun and blah, blah, blah. And they blamed it on the keys. And they were so vague about it that they didn't even specify what video it was. And it's like, but if you look it up, there's so many instances. Which one are you talking about? Like,
well, and there's a different video where they're talking, where in this interview, the Sig rep guys, and they're talking about how the one police officer bends down, and then when he's standing up, the gun goes off. And he's like, if you look closely in the video, he's standing next to another officer, and the officer that's standing next to him, his keys were probably went into the holster and triggered the.
And it's like, well, how is that key gonna go in far enough to hit the trigger and then pull the trigger all the way?
The probability of that happening, like in Sig's testing, to be fair, they did sit there and show that it could happen, but it's like, okay, what's the probability of that happening? You know, and the angle in the video, I don't think the guy was even close enough to the other officer for that to have happened, but that's what Sig's claiming.
And Sig's big claim, too, is that, okay, it's the holster's problem. Yeah, all these holsters that military and law enforcement are using are designed for the P320. So what are you supposed to do? Like
they encompass the trigger.
Yeah, and and they're light-bearing holsters in their defense, which are wider near the trigger, and like they showed in that video, you can reach a key in and push the trigger.
But my argument to that would be, why isn't it happening with Glocks, M&Ps, Springfield XDs, 1911s?
Well, and like we mentioned, there are so many Glocks in circulation, and yet you don't ever hear of a Glock going off in a holster. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and then we'll get to the FBI report that was released here not very long ago, just in a minute. But you go back to the to the military. It's been in military service 8 years now, and look how many discharges there have been related to it. You take the 1911, it was adopted in 1911, and and 8 years later, it had already been through World War I, and there was no recalls. And you look at the Beretta, and it went clear up until 1985 when it was replaced by the Beretta,
and no
to
recalls,
be NATO compliant
with
the 9mm.
Yep.
And there was no issues with the Beretta. I'm not a huge Beretta fan, but there was no issues with it.
It served its purpose.
It served its purpose, absolutely.
I'd rather carry a Beretta 99.999% of the time over 100%. You know, there's just no.
Well, and this is the other thing. So 1911s, the original design was not drop safe. So if you drop one on the muzzle with a round in the chamber, the firing pin will have enough inertia to hit the primer most of the time to set the gun off, and yet. It went through World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam. You had guys jumping out of airplanes, parachuting into, Nazi-occupied Europe, and
nobody shot themselves in the leg. Like,
you know, it just didn't happen. Like it's just.
So after now, pre voluntary upgrade from Sig, you could drop these and they go off. Since that upgrade, they do not go off when you drop them. You can drop them all different angles, whatever, they're just not going to go off. But they continue to go off in people's guns that have been upgraded. They're holstered and they just go off. And so the question is brought up, like, well, why? And what's causing that? Yeah, well, Sig is claiming the light-bearing holsters, keys, whatever else, and the trigger's getting pulled, but that's not the case. It's just not.
and then in Wyoming here recently, there was an Air Force. A gun went off in the Air Force, killed a soldier, a young man.
Yeah, that was just recent. Yeah. Nothing official has been released on that, but the Air Force has suspended the use of the M18 pending their investigation results.
Which the M18 is, of course, the P320.
The 320.
Yeah.
And the ICE has officially transitioned to the Glock 19.
Yeah.
They're done with it. They're like, no more use, absolutely none. We're done. And look at how many major police departments went to it. And have had so many
reversed.
Well, they're kind of the idea was, okay, the military's tested this and has adopted it. It's got to be okay. We don't have to go through all that to make our own adoption. So these major big police departments all adopted them, and then they've all abandoned them since because of this very issue right here we're speaking of. Safety issues.
There are still a lot of them out there in use, but I think one by one, people are starting to figure out that the gun's just not safe, period.
Yeah. Well,
and
go ahead.
There's a company, Gray Guns. They do customizations and all that fun stuff with SIGs and HKs. And they have been, because they're so heavily involved with SIG and the 320, that's a huge, huge portion of their business. They have been I would say SIG has been extremely standoffish. They won't claim any responsibility. That's what really makes me the most mad about this, is SIG's adamant that there is no problem and they will not accept any responsibility. And they won't. Well, the thing is with the drop test, they changed their drop test procedures after the whole issue came about. And it's like, well, they should have had strict testing procedures in place prior to releasing the gun, period.
Yeah, see, that's my biggest contention.
They won't continue to test it. They just say, oh, well, we have the most rigorous drop test now in the industry, blah, blah, blah. They won't. Well, and in the video, that interview with Mac, they said, oh, at the end of this, we're going to show you our drop test, blah, 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 all that, and then they never did. They sat there and talked about it in the video, and then they didn't do it. But Gray Guns, back to Gray Guns real quick, they have been very transparent through all of this, and they have conducted their own testing, and I feel like they're taking more ownership over this than SIG, and yet they're not making SIG P320s.
They don't have a dog in the fight?
Yeah, other than, it's a big part of their business. They customize P320s, P365s, HKs, all that. 226s as well, 220s, they do it all. But they're releasing, they just announced yesterday on, what is today? Today is July 27th when we're filming this. So yesterday, the 26th, Gray Guns announced that they're releasing a series of videos. They're releasing it as a series because it was going to be way too long to put in one video, but they came up with like 29 different tests that they ran an upgraded 320 through, and they could not get it to replicate going off.
And Joe, I might indicate, I don't know what Gray Guns is doing to them, but a lot of these are so loose, and that is part of the problem, is the play in them. So one gun's more susceptible to it than others.
Yeah.
But
so we're going to get into the FBI report here. I don't want to go too long, and this could be a really long video, but we're going to try to keep it fairly concise. There's a lot of jokes though floating on the internet. Here's a good one. It says, first rule of gun safety: treat every gun like it's a P320. Keep it unloaded and disassembled in a safe direction. And you can read comment sections in that, and they're pretty funny to read, and it's good entertainment. But at this point, it's almost not
even a joke.
It's not a joke anymore. I mean, it's just,
if you have one, sell it.
Well, and people have been seriously injured and caused permanent injury from these going off. And now there's a Air Force serviceman that's dead. A lot of police officers are out of commission now because they've been shot in the leg.
Why SIG won't own it is because if they owned it, owned up to, there is a problem, they would go out of business. Because they would be sued so much and they would lose so much money, they would have to go out of business.
First off, they're heavily insured for it, but no, they're not. That's not a true statement, actually.
Well, and on that note, though, the FBI, we're going to get into that now. I guess we'll move on to the FBI's case and what they found.
The FBI is probably laughing because they never adopted the SIG.
But
They've stuck with the Glock.
They did, and they've now deemed the Sig P320 is not suitable for carry, basically, in a duty weapon. And
if it's not suitable for government use, what makes you think as a civilian you should be using it?
Because of that report now, ICE has dropped it, so they don't use it anymore. They went back to the Glock.
But even before this FBI report, there's been police departments all across the country that have been dropping it and banning it from use.
Yeah, and there are classes, like professional classes you go attend for handguns or whatever, that have banned the 320.
Yeah.
They just won't allow them in their classroom.
One of my friends from South Africa actually runs a training course, and he hasn't allowed the 320 in his course for months now. So,
So we'll read some quotes from this FBI report. We'll link it. You can go search it. It's on the internet everywhere. You can read the official documents. It's 30-something pages long. Yeah, 32 pages long. But basically, it was the Michigan State Police that had just adopted the 320. They were going through their training course of the 320 for all their officers, so they could be proficient with the handgun.
Before we even get into that, though, the Michigan State Police, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. They received a whole batch of brand new SIGs from SIG, and a good portion of those guns wouldn't even work out of the box. They had
they had to.
They had a bunch of them with dead trigger issues.
And they were because they were out of spec, and so they had to send a bunch back to SIG, and then SIG also sent parts to fix some of these guns.
Yeah.
With their armorer who was trained in the 320, he replaced some of the parts himself, while SIG replaced a good portion of them. So the gun that went off, the armorer had done the work on.
Yeah.
But he was a SIG armorer.
But he was a certified P320 armorer, so he had completed all requirements for knowing how to do that. So the officer that had it go off, the gun had about 1,200 rounds through it at this point. He's holding his keys in one hand, so no, his keys didn't hit the trigger like SIG claims on a lot of these, and he had something else in his other hand. They said both hands were full, including his keys in one hand and something else. The gun went off in the holster, did not hit him in the leg, thankfully. They did not remove the gun from the holster. They took the gun, they x-rayed it in the holster, and found that there were no obstructions in the holster that had hit the trigger, anything like that. There was an empty shell casing in the chamber still, because the holster, it's a level 3 holster, all closed. The slide didn't cycle. So that chamber, the empty chamber was still, or the empty case was still in the chamber. So they started going through, inspecting the gun, inspecting all the parts and components to see if there was something that was broken, out of spec, whatever. And they found, let me find it here.
If you're carrying a Sig P320, just get rid of the damn thing. It's a piece of shit. You'll kill yourself.
Yeah, well, and the trigger did reset in the holster. So that's something to note. Now, SIG claims there are 5 different safeties in the gun that prevent it from going off without the trigger being pulled. What the FBI ultimately found was that, and I'll read this little paragraph here because this is kind of the big part of what their whole investigation was based off. It said, following the initial evaluation, limited live fire testing was conducted for function and to determine if the striker safety lock spring moved. So when they disassembled the gun, they found that the safety lock spring or the striker safety lock spring was out of place. It was not where it was supposed to be, so it wasn't engaged correctly. And so they decided, okay, well, that was an issue. That was the only thing they found from the gun that was out of spec when they inspected it. So they put it back in place. They took it out and they fired 50 rounds through the gun and then checked it again, and that spring was again out of place. And they repeated that 3 times in a row. 50 rounds, spring was out of place. They put it back, another 50 rounds, spring was out of place again. So that pretty much was the whole basis for their investigation. They went on and checked all the other safety features. There's a primary and secondary sear engagement. And with that spring out of place, that sear engagement through normal movement can fail, is basically what they discovered. So, but in order for it to fail, that spring has to be out of place. But the gun, the spring was just out of place, period. So that's why the gun went off. Ultimately, that's what they determined, is that the gun went off because that spring was out of place, and him moving around, walking, whatever,
had bumped it,
had caused those sear engagements to lose engagement and go off.
And that's just a shitty thing. I mean,
well,
seriously.
So what? Well, but it is. But what caused that? Is it parts that were out of spec? They haven't really specified that.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Wouldn't surprise me at all if parts were out of spec, the spring was faulty, whatever. You look at even the P365 has a really good track record, but it has The trigger reset spring is known to break in those. So maybe Sig has an issue with their springs. I don't know what
quality across
it
the
could
board
be
for
just
Sig.
general quality. Well, and if a bunch of those guns they shipped to the Michigan police, Michigan State Police, a lot of them had to go back because they were out of spec. Is there a quality control issue that's causing these 320s to have their issues?
Mm-hmm.
I guess that as people continue to investigate, we'll find out. But
or continue to blow the balls off.
And I asked the question, at what point does Sig lose the military contract because the Air Force finds that the gun went off in its holster by itself and killed that airman? Will the Army follow suit with the Air Force?
Probably.
That's really the question to beg.
I think they will. And while you're on that subject, Joe, I got to throw something out. It's kind of rubbed me wrong since we left the 1911 and 1985 and developed the Beretta. The early Berettas were actually made in Italy. Part of the contract was they'd be made here, but a lot of them were produced that came from overseas. But my thing is, it's like we got some very good domestic gun manufacturers. It should be just an absolute byline that it must be an American maker that makes and supplies our gun. We can make the best guns in the world, period. And it's like it needs to be an American-based, American-made product for our soldiers.
Well, technically, that is a American-made and designed gun.
I know. This is an American-made gun, but is SIG an American-based company?
They are.
They are?
They are now, yep.
Well, there's 3 different companies. There's Sig USA,
right. And they're the merging.
Well, and they're their own distinct company, and everything with the 320. That's all the American company. It's not like it's the Swiss. They're not even
They're completely separate. Company,
completely
they're
separate
not even
company.
related anymore.
Like they're still, maybe like a parent company or something, but it's not like it's
they operate individually, basically.
Yeah.
So
completely separate companies legally.
So the money never leaves U.S. and goes overseas.
No.
Nope.
Okay. I learned something. Okay.
So I want to read a little excerpt here from the FBI's conclusion. It said, this is their conclusion. It says, a reliable test could not be developed at the time of this document to test the effectiveness of the secondary sear notch. However, testing did indicate with movements representing those common to law enforcement officer, it is possible to render the striker safety lock inoperable and ineffective at preventing the striker from impacting a chambered round if complete sear engagement is lost. And they found that sear engagement could be lost with that sear engagement spring going out of place, which happened. They repeated that 3 times in a row and determined, it's faulty. So it is important to note that the striker safety lock by design is the last safety in the line to prevent an unintended discharge, as it is in place to protect against a secondary sear notch override. So ultimately they found that the gun could go off. Yeah. Well, and if you don't trust the FBI's findings, you're probably not using your brain. And even Jake mentioned at the beginning, what did you say there, Jake, about where there's a fire, there's typically
where there's smoke,
there's typically a fire, and at this point it's common enough and it's happening enough. You just don't hear it with M&Ps or Glocks or anything else. They don't go off. Yeah, period. They're still negligent discharges that they can prove somebody pulled the trigger. I'm
but
gonna
to go kabang inside the
which
holster.
I'll say some of these 320 incidents have been negligent discharges. Whether it's their finger's still on the trigger as they're holstering, whatever. They caught that one on footage from one of the classes that GBRS group was hosting. The guy had a finger to the side of the trigger guard, and as he put it in his light-bearing holster, the holster sticks out just enough. It caught his finger, pushed his finger into the trigger, and made the gun go off. Which that could be part of them, but a lot of these are just holstered guy walking around, bam, it goes off, or it's holstered, he's getting out of his car, it goes off. The
one I was watching last night, or the ones I should say, there were several, hands weren't even near it.
Yeah.
I mean, there was, in fact, there was no movement on one of them. The guy was standing there and had his hands out, and boom, it just went off, and it was like, holy cow.
Yep. So I want to close here. There's a guy, John Correa. He runs the Active Self-Protection channel on YouTube. So he's an expert witness in a lot of use of force cases, whether it's self-defense or a police-involved shooting. But his channel is really big and quite interesting. If you want to go watch that, you can learn a lot about self-defense scenarios and that. But this was before the FBI released their deal. he came out and this is his statement. I'll read it quote for quote here. He said, "There's too much smoke around the P320 for there to not be fire. I am not a hater. No one paid me or asked me to say this, and I'm not denigrating Sig Sauer. Though we haven't seen definitive proof of what is wrong inside the P320, the anecdotes are pulling up so much that they're becoming evidence that something is wrong. There are too many documented cases with strong evidence, like caught on video, that the gun discharged without the trigger being pulled, sitting in a holster completely untouched. And saying, but mine hasn't had a problem is exactly what plenty of Corvair drivers said. But just because yours hasn't had the problem doesn't mean it won't, and doesn't mean it isn't reasonable. It isn't a reasonable risk to use when there are dozens of other perfectly fine choices in the market that don't have the same risk." So, like he's saying, there's plenty of other guns that don't have a risk at all.
Glocks,
And it's not like it's and they're all competitively
And
priced. It's not like it's
not. The Sig's even more expensive in most cases.
yeah.
How much is that?
Hey, let me finish his quote here. He said, "The gun has had problems from the beginning with the voluntary upgrade of the trigger to try to solve the inertial firing on drop that it had. If I owned one, it would be a range only, pick it up off the table only gun." And I think he pretty much summed it up well there. There's just it's not worth the risk. If you own one, go sell it, trade it in, and buy a Glock.
Or just use it at the range and that's it.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and make sure you don't chamber around without it pointing down range in a safe direction.
And you think about it too, you guys. We're actually quite safety conscious, but here's the deal. This house obviously is the wrong holster for it, but anytime you grab a holster and you go to pull a gun out of it, your hand is forward of that muzzle, even though you're not pointing it at your hand per se. But there's a lot of people who are going to be a little bit careless, and I know that because one of the lawsuits against Sig was on that very issue. The guy pulled the gun out, knows his finger was off the trigger, and it goes off about right here and hit him through the hand and took off fingers and whatever else. So, you know, it's like a gun that fires by itself. You can be the safest gun handler in the world. It's a dangerous gun. So
at some point or another, it's going to cross your foot, your toe, something.
yeah, well, even at the range.
Yeah.
If you're, you know, you got a berm down there, whatever, and the gun, and you boom, and then all of a sudden the gun goes off on its own, and it goes over the berm or whatever. I mean,
Goes
it's
off
just,
after recoil, you know,
Yeah,
pointing up in
yeah.
the air.
yeah. I haven't heard of any going full auto, but I guess that could happen. But I
Yeah.
don't know. But it's but a gun that will fire by itself is a dangerous gun, even for the safest gun handler in the world.
You know, we've had in the gun world, we've had this quota for so long that guns don't kill people, people kill people. And now the 320,
Well, I guess the Sig P320
now
is
that's wrong.
people
The
killer.
320 is just going off and shooting people. I mean, it's just, it's not a safe gun, period. And I don't, well, and even if it's an extremely rare occurrence, because there are so many in circulation, they're being used constantly, nonstop. Again, it still could happen, and there are better, safer options out there. I just, you know, I'm sorry,
Well,
but just don't buy a 320.
Just look at the gun. It's an awful gun, even without the safety issues. Like
It's
the
ugly.
the
Putting
grip-
all that aside,
Yeah, like it's got a high bore axis. There's no reason in the world to have that high of a bore axis on a
That was the first-
modern stalker fired gun nowadays.
that was
you
the
know?
first thing that struck me when I handled my very first P320, or handled the very first one. I thought was, why such a high axis there? I don't
Yeah.
understand it.
It's
and
like
then
a
just the play with the slide and frame, the
Mushy
trigger.
trigger.
The trigger is just absolutely
the trigger
awful.
is like a sponge. That's what
And then the let's see what else.
Besides being ugly,
Yeah, I mean it's just ugly. Like there's something else I was gonna say.
they have all
and
their
then the
juiced up cool variants and all that.
and then you have Sig's quality control with it, and it's like, well, why would you even buy it? Like, like honestly, if you're shipping guns to police departments that have adopted your gun and they have dead trigger issues, you got quality control issues.
yeah,
you know,
100%. So
yeah.
In today's world,
did
that
they
should not
specify
happen.
how many of those guns went
I
back?
don't remember if they did or not, but I know there was a good portion of them, and it's like
Yeah.
there's no excuse for that whatsoever.
In today's world, there's no
Yeah.
excuse.
Yeah,
If it happened 1 in a million, it's like, okay, it's just a bad gun.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like we've had Rugers that were just they'd misfire or whatever else, I mean, when you're producing millions of firearms, you're going to have one or two here and there that just have an issue. But when it's like a continual and then the self-firing thing, I mean, that's what's
and
part of that.
Sig came out when the airman here last week killed himself, or his gun
shot.
killed him. Yeah, when his gun went off and killed him. And they made a post about it and saying, giving their condolences to the family, whatever, and that they have reached out to the Air Force to offer any support in the investigation. The Air Force hasn't responded, basically. But they turned comments off on the post because they know they're just going to get shredded in the comments. They made that post back in February about, it ends today, the truth about the P320. And since then, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And it's just, it's time to stop. It needs to be handled. And the thing that makes me most upset about it is that Sig is not taking any kind of ownership. Whether it's their problem or not, they should be taking ownership of the problem because it's their handgun and helping investigate and trying to find what's going on and doing these thorough tests, and yet they're not. They don't.
Well, and then
they just flip you the bird and say, forget it.
The Washington Police Academy has banned the 320 from being used, and Sig just within the last couple of days has filed a lawsuit against them for banning the Sig. And it's like, you honestly got to wonder how Sig sees this even like turning out. You look at the people are just like, they're just fed up with it. Like, why are you trying to force people to use your gun?
That when I learned of that lawsuit just last night, in fact, I thought this is absurd. That is about the worst PR that you can possibly do.
Yep, it's like, and they're threatening to sue YouTubers now that are degrading the P320. So if we get sued by Sig,
fuck you.
But hey, we haven't. Everything we've covered in this video has been 100% just research based from the FBI's findings. That's what we discussed, and then Sig's interview with Mac.
Even at that, if we have a bad opinion of a product, that's I believe our constitutional right to express it.
And doesn't that, I mean, that if that's the case, what kind of company is that? And do you really want to support them? No, you don't. And I've been a P365 fan since they came out. I love the P365, but I'm having a real hard time recommending a Sig to anybody.
Yeah. The only thing I like from them is their electronic optics, and that's about it. And I'm going to be switching all of that out here
I
soon
even stopped carrying my 320s here a little while ago. Or my 365s, because I'm just like, I don't feel like supporting Sig, honestly. I cannot recommend any of their products. I just won't. With the kind of company they are and the attitude they have toward their customer base is awful.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
What Sig has done has been a perfect example of what not to do in this situation.
Maybe it's about time everyone quit buying anything Sig, and then they go away.
Sig has made it very clear that they do not care about the civilian market either, because they basically have said it doesn't matter if civilians buy our guns or not. We're still making tons of money off military contracts. They've got the Australian military contract for the 320,
Canadian,
US
on the 320. Right?
On the 320.
Okay,
but
so when all this comes through, guess what? They're going to really miss that civilian market, aren't they?
Yeah. Well, and it makes you wonder at what point all this is going to come to an end, but it might be a long time yet before all this comes to a close.
Well, and I'm so anti-lawsuit, meaning that a month or so ago, and I think it just dropped this morning when we're making this video, but on the single action army pattern guns and why you only carry 5 rounds in them and so forth. The reason I bring that up is that we don't have a dog in the fight on this. We're only trying to help people understand the safety of guns, the good and the bad, and what to do and not to do. And the Sig falls under this category of this is a very unsafe gun. Joe jokes about, can't recommend it. Well, Porter would recommend it to somebody he doesn't like and say, oh yeah, carry fully loaded with carry
right
appendix style. Carry appendix style. We just don't recommend
my in-laws.
we don't recommend carrying the Sig with a round in the chamber. It's that simple.
Yeah. And yet, but again, I think we've beat the horse to death. Just go buy a Glock or an M&P.
Or just buy a 1911.
Or
a Ruger.
The RXM, that's a great Glock alternative. That's $400, and it's a great gun right off the shelf. Yeah. Anyways, I think we've about covered the topic well enough here, but we'll do more as things progress, and anyways, I think we've covered the topic well enough. Throw your comments in. I do love Sig P320 comment section, so let's make this one real good. If you want to get in there and just light it up, we'll love to hear it. So
why the Sig is such a great gun. That's what we should label this.
Yeah, whenever I need good entertainment or a good laugh, I just get into a P320 forum and read the comments. You know, if you're ever feeling depressed, just get in there and read it. And, yeah, you'll have a good laugh or two. So, thanks for watching, guys. We appreciate your support, and we'll see you next time.